The body of Christ is like water. No matter what condition it faces, it cannot be destroyed. Nothing can stop its flow. Whether it be extreme heat or cold, there is no natural event known to man that can render water useless or diminish its value. So the good news is that there isn't anything that can neutralize the body of Christ. The bad news is that it is operating at a diminished capacity, which has affected its output. The body will need to reevaluate, confess, and reconsecrate this century if it is going to rise and return to the days of its wellness. This wellness can only be evidenced by the product it produces and not by the gain it possesses. This is T. Allen Stringer, called to walk in the office of pastor in 1984. Welcome to LT21C, Letters to the 21st Century Church. The future of the Negro Church has many potential roadblocks just down the road on its journey towards social relevance. It will face opposition from within and without as it seeks to fit into the coming Post Trumpin Era. The following will prove a challenge for this body: money, racism, gender equality, and sexual diversity. Welcome to LT21C, Letters to the 21st Century Church, where we'll discuss the future dilemma of the Negro Church. Welcome to LT21C. This is your host, T. Allen Stringer, and welcome to another edition of Letters to the 21st Century Church. As you heard today, we're going to be talking on the subject, the future dilemma of the Negro Church. I chose Negro because I don't like the word black. I know we use it. I know sometimes I slip and say it. But I prefer the word Negro because black was put in as a color line for code and for control, for distinction, and all the other things that we have been victimized over the centuries. So I've chosen not to use the word black in this discussion, not the black church, but the Negro Church. If you want to hear a bit about why I believe that, Google Jacqueline Baccalaureate, who talks about the birth of a white nation on YouTube. You understand why I'm getting away from the word black. I like the word Negro. Okay, so let's talk about the Negro Church and why I say that the Negro Church has a dilemma in its future. First, let's put it into context. We have Donald John Trump Sr. as president. And Donald John Trump represents an era that I believe feeds into this whole new story about the Negro Church's dilemma. His counterpart was Barack Hussein Obama. He began the process. Here's what I mean. The subjects that I'm going to be discussing that are dilemmas for the future of the Negro Church are the words money, racism, gender equality, and sexual diversity. Money and racism, that points to Donald Trump. Gender equality and sexual diversity, that points to Barack Obama. So when Obama came into office, one of the first things that he signed for gender equality was the Lilly Ledbetter Act, making sure women get equal pay for equal work. You remember that? And of course, then the next thing that he signed, or should I say endorsed without endorsing it, was the idea of same-sex marriage, because his vice president, Joe Biden, went on TV and said he was for it. And then the press pushed in on Barack Obama. And next thing you know, he emerged saying, I have evolved and now I believe in sexual diversity. And he pulled away Eric Holder from defending DOMA, which made the Republicans livid and conservatives livid. He stopped defending DOMA. And of course, it fell and collapsed. And so June, 26th of that year, it became the law of the land. Okay. So Barack Obama had 8 years to roll out that side. that gender equality and sexual diversity thing. In comes Donald Trump. And what does he represent? He represents money and racism. I'm not calling him a racist. I'm saying he represents it. Of course he does, and you can see that. The statistics speak for themselves. Hate groups have doubled and tripled under his tenure. Guns have skyrocketed on sales, and all of the outlandish, overt racist tones in America have risen to the surface on full display on television, and everywhere you look, it's there now. So he's kind of let the freaks come out at night, so to speak. And so here we have it now. He's in office, and Trump is doing a dandy of a job, man. He's doing a bang-up job. He has the confidence of that group at an all-time high. The reason the elite, the conservatives, Republicans tolerate him is because Donald Trump, he is a man that makes sure the money is flowing to the businesses. Deregulations is his middle name. Forget John. They should name him Donald Deregulations Trump, because he's deregulated everything, stuff we don't even know about because he keeps us so busy watching his antics on TV. We don't know what's going on. When he leaves office, oh boy, when you open the cupboard, you're going to find out a whole lot of stuff is in there. He's done a lot, because the wealthy want to have a foothold in America again. The trusts want to take control all over again. The rich want to have power, control globally, because it's a global community now, a global economy. So they need more power, and they can't afford to be second-class citizens in America when they are rich, because the world is now shrunk economically. Everything flows together. So they need the world. They need control. And America is this platform. So he represents money, but he also represents racism, as I stated, because you see the groups, the marches, things that are happening. Of course, Donald Trump fans the fumes when he says there are good people on either side, and you know the story about that. And all the other things that he does are feeding the flames of that mindset. And so I'm not sure if he's done yet. It took Barack Obama 8 years to do what he had to do. So if the law of averages stays the same, I'm so sorry, but he'd probably be in for another 4 years. I still say God has the last word. Maybe it won't need 4 more years, because as in the law of construction, it takes longer to build something and it takes less time to tear it down. Now, I'm not saying that same-sex marriage is not tearing it down. I'm simply saying it didn't go in the direction of destroying the social structure. It didn't break people down per se. But the stuff that he's doing, racism, that's tearing it down. And the money stuff, that's tearing it down, because people are going to be hungry. There's going to be much hate and hatred in our land, and it's going to end in no good way if he continues. But that takes less time than the other thing. So now, how does this square against the Negro Church, and why is that important? Because the common denominator between both parties, be it Democratic or Republican, the Negro vote weighs heavy on both sides. And the sides of the Republican, if they can't get it to go for them, then they need to squelch it. They need to suppress it. They need to stop it, because it's a mighty train, and they need to kill it, because if they don't, if it metastasizes and all the Negroes come out, it's going to be a problem. So they got to kill it. And conversely, to the Democratic Party, depend on it. So they need the Negro vote, because the Negro vote is going to help them win. It's a big group. Now, where do both sides look to for that vote? They look to the church, because generally speaking, at least at last count, the majority of the votes come from people who are religious in the Negro churches. And the pastors have a lot of sway. Believe me when I tell you that. I'm one for 35 years. We don't come out and say it directly, but we can wink an eye. We can twitch our nose, and they'll know how we feel about certain things. But that withstanding, just the various issues in society, when juxtaposed to scriptures, also steers the Negro Church in the direction of its vote. So here's where I see the dilemma in the future of the Negro Church. It has to do with these 4 words, because these 4 words are connected to 2 parties. Money, racism, connected to the Republican Party. Gender equality and sexual diversity, connected to the Democratic Party. Now, the latter 2 have been worked on. For 8 years, President Barack Obama championed these ideas. One of the first bills he signed when coming into office was the Lilly Ledbetter Act. That was about equal work, equal pay for women. And of course, somewhere along his tenureship, his wonderful Vice President, Joe Biden, went on TV to support same-sex marriage, and then the media converged on the president, and the president had to go into his think tank, and when he emerged, he said, I have evolved on this issue. And he pulled Eric Holder away from defending DOMA, which was the Defense of Marriage Act, which was designed to stave off same-sex marriage. He let it die on the vine, and it became the law of the land in June. That's Barack's legacy as far as gender equality and sexual diversity. In comes Donald John Trump Sr., and you know money is his game. Weren't so sure about racism, but I guess we probably should with the Central Park Five. But money and racism seems to be two of the big pillars for him. They motivate his voting base, and they also keep him out of trouble. Because think about it. If it wasn't for the money and what he provided with the judges and the money for the wealthy, they would have abandoned him a long time ago. The evidence has been overwhelming. But the wealthy elites in D.C., for most of those senators, not all, are millionaires. He deregulates everything, taking the handcuffs off of industries to do as they choose to make money, to cut corners and not spend money on safety. Who cares about safety? It just costs money for safety. All of these things they like. So whereas they hold their noses, he bringing home the money, as they say. Stock market is going up and up and up. They like this guy. So he is really holding up that first bookend. Racism is somewhat overt, sometimes subtle, but you can rest assured this guy has certainly championed the image of racism. David Duke likes him. He said as much. Who was it? Bannon, Steve Bannon, who was one of his chief of staff, is known to fan the flames of racism through Breitbart and then those other newspapers that are popular among the radical right of the Republican Party. And so the racist arm of the Republican Party is strong. For a long time, they had been hidden. I call them people under the stairs. We knew they were there, but they were not coming out because the ones who were in office are more civil, more conservative. They wouldn't speak those things loud. They had quiet dog whistles. Trump uses a trombone. He don't use a dog whistle. And he lets them know how he feels, and he says things. He makes statements, and they're coded, but they're thick codes that we all know and understand. So they like him, and so they're holding him in office. So he's doing well. Now, Obama had 8 years. One would argue, is it going to take 8 years for Trump to finish off what he's doing? Not necessarily so. In construction, it only takes a little time to tear something down. It takes a long time to build something up. And what he's doing is tearing things down because this nation is so divided. Hate is strong. He is pushing the envelope. He's not being diplomatic at all. He's also killing us in the world. We are no longer as prominent, trustworthy as a nation because he has shown an affinity for Putin and Erdogan and thugs like the guy in Saudi Arabia, and they like him. And so the nations which are civil, like in the NATO alliance and the EEC, aren't comfortable. They aren't sure. And Putin is just roaming the earth with his chin high in the air. And so we got a problem on our hands. And his job, I hold, was to detach us from being the security officer of the world. Because even though America may not be a sanctified nation, it was a Christian nation. And I believe even though it was not at the pinnacle of righteousness, I do believe that God held favor over it and still does. And so I think when America roamed the earth, in a certain sense, righteousness roamed the earth. Now, I didn't say they were righteous, but in a certain sense, righteousness roamed the earth. Because conversely, you had false religions, you had atheism of the other nations. And so if you would boil down the nations, take the lesser of two evils, like I like to say, America was pretty much close, at least to the idea of at least acknowledging there's an idea of a God and allowing religion for the most part, to exist and assure. So it was very important. Once you pull America back, the devil is going to have a party, because America brings with it not just wealth, but a religious presence. All that's being drawn back, being abandoned by this man. So I don't know if it's going to take him 8 years. It may well do. If it does, hold on here. Now, here's what I think. Here's how the Negro Church is tied down. Because when Trump comes out, because I talked about a post-Trump era, when Trump comes out of office, and this is two ways I'm looking at this. He either comes out because he's beaten by a Democratic candidate. And I'm not so sure that candidate won't be Pete Buttigieg. Now, I know folks say, oh, no way the blacks going to vote for him. Well, you just keep watching. It could be him, or some kind of way he's going to get in there, or somebody like him is going to get in there, because I do believe that the agenda of the gay and lesbians will be at front and center prior to the second coming of God. I believe that. And so he may get put out, I started to say, because somebody like Buttigieg might get in. I think it might be Buttigieg get in, and that's going to set the last stage of the earth, as far as I'm concerned. Or he may have 4 more years. But the post-Trump era, be it this 4th year or another 4 years, is going to be problematic for the Negro Church. Here's how I mean this. Because anybody knows that when it comes time for voting and nomination, you go by way of the Negro Church to get votes. I remember growing up, and the mayors would come to the Negro Church on Sunday to give their little speeches and to say their little nice things to influence the Negro vote. I got to get out of that word. It's a hard word to break. Get out of the Negro vote to get it out and to get the support at the polls, because they're big. They carry the urban communities, and our numbers are big. I think they're larger than what they're telling us. I don't believe the census is being accurately reported, but that's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother letter. But they do carry numbers. They carry weight. And so they're going to the churches to get their votes. Now, I believe that what Trump is also doing to the Republican Party is he's destroying its brand. I believe that it's going to diminish on the vine, and I also think you're going to end up with one party rule, basically the Democratic Party. Democracy, by definition, means rule of the people. And the people must rule before the second coming of the Lord. Now, the rule under one man. Now, what I mean by the rule of the people is that this one man will free the animal spirits of humanity. They won't be sequestered by conservatism, by radical right thinking, by purity thinking. People will have the right to self-determination, as is indicated in our Constitution. Truly, they're going to try to interpret that doctrine, because if you read it the way it's written, it has no boundaries of religion or morality. It's self-determination and liberty, the pursuit of happiness, what makes you happy. And I think it'll be a Democratic Party under a one-man control that will do it. And so when that era begins to dawn, after Trump is put out of office or leaves office or whatever it might be, I believe that the Negro vote is still strong, but it's strong through his church. And right now, Buttigieg could probably win if the Negro Church would back him. He has all the other groups. The man has smarts. The man has intelligence. The man is no dummy. He's no coward. But his dilemma is the Negro vote. That's right. And I believe that in the future, municipalities, and they've already started doing this, are going to weigh heavy down on the Negro Church, because within a lot of these governments, you have a lot of gay and lesbians. You have a lot of them undercover. Did you know Eleanor Roosevelt was a lesbian? Yeah, she was. There's a lot of them that are undercover, and they're in these places, and they're tired of this tyrant who is pushing money and racism. And I feel them. I get it. I understand it. I feel for them, because the man has lost his mind. And the thing that is holding them back is potentially the Negro vote. So what's going to happen with the Negro Church, it's going to have to make some decisions along the way. It's going to have to get along with same-sex marriages, or it's going to find itself at the receiving end of strenuous laws and regulations going to make it hard for it to exist. Now, I know you say that the government shall make no laws concerning religion, but that doesn't deal with the local government. That's the federal government. And I'm seeing all kinds of things taking place right now. They got this thing called pilots. That stands for payment in lieu of taxes. That is slated for the church. Eventually, they're going to go after the church's money because he's watching a lot of these preachers driving around in fancy machines and living in big houses on several coasts and buying jets and airplanes and things. And the people are struggling. They're going to make the case and they're going to get the money. They're going to squeeze the Negro Church. It's not going to be because of that alone, but that's going to be an entrance way for them. They're going to get in through these vices, and they're going to work from the inside out because they understand this. If you're going to get the much needed Negro vote, you have to break or tame the Negro Church. And they're going to find ways to do it. They've already done some things. I've been watching some things. I have another show on that one day and tell you some of the stories about what I've noticed they're doing through philanthropies and how they're doing things to prevent you from getting money. They're now putting out these litmus tests to see if you qualify for the money. And I give you an example. I had a friend who wanted to get some furniture, and they wouldn't give it to him because they looked at his church doctrine. Okay. And so he came to me and asked me, they said, if you get another 501c3, we'll do it for them. Now, I have a 501c3, which is in my church entity, but it's another entity. And when they looked at that church, that 501c3 that I have, rather, the name of that 501c3 is close to my church name. Our church name is Bible Way. And then that 501c3, which is not a church organization, is Bible Way. And they wouldn't give it to him then. He had to go to another brother who has a CDC, which has no indication that it's a church. And they gave it to him to give to him. So they're starting to screen who they're letting these free dollars flow to within the Negro community. And a lot of those people who are on those boards are of that persuasion. And they're finding cunning ways to strip us out. They're building internal entities within the urban community. A lot of white groups are coming into the communities to work in these communities, to familiarize themselves with the Negroes. And they're helping them, displacing the Negro Church. See, that's what's going to happen. They're going to displace those that won't get along, and you'll no longer be valuable to your constituent. And, you know, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. So if you're taking care of them, then it'll be easy to persuade them to work with you. I know a young lady who came up in a Negro church, sanctified church, and, you know, she doesn't believe in same-sex marriage, but she ran into this gay couple at her job, and they were just the nicest people to her. They gave her stuff for family. They brought presents and money. And even though she did not advocate for that, she was softened by the generosity. She was softened by what they did for her. So I could see that happening over time. So the dilemma for the Negro Church is going to be what to do when that begins to weigh in on our ministries. How are we going to handle this? What's the way around it? It's coming, and it's coming like a locomotive to a church near you. So that's the dilemma, the future dilemma of the Negro Church. What are we going to do? Are we going to be like a Laodicea church? Are we going to grow lukewarm? The word lukewarm means unenthusiastic about God. Be neutral and not worry about defending the points of what the scriptures declare. Or are we going to remain hot and suffer the consequences of being put on the outside of our societies because we will be called homophobic? Will be called people who are not Christ-like, because that's what will happen to you. And if you're depending on those monies will dry up because alternative groups are coming in to displace you. Or other ministries are going the way of Laodicea and saying, we're okay with this because we're into, this is the password. Social justice is morphing into a word of conformity. It may have started out right during the voting rights era. It may have started out right during the beginning seasons of the NAACP, but it's slowly being transformed into, I'm not going to judge you if you don't judge me. I'll love God. You do what you want to do. But our common denominator is that we want to help the people. That's where this is going. That's where it's going. And so you're going to find a lot of that happening. So a lot of churches are going to morph into those social justice ministries. And they're not going to be concerned about righteous justice. It's going to be social justice. And who cares about God's justice? And you're going to see a lot of that. So there's a dilemma for the Negro Church. I don't know if the church is ready for this. I'm going to be talking about it more and more and prepping ministries on how to navigate these very shark-infested waters that are coming our way. Well, that's it for me for right now. This is T. Allen Stringer, and I hope you enjoyed this installment of The Future Dilemma of the Negro Church on LT21C, Letters to the 21st Century Church. Remember, in all thy getting, get a good understanding. Until next time.